Season 3 of the Prima Donna podcast. My name's Matt Grant. I'm a composer and soloist from Melbourne, Australia. I acknowledge that this podcast was recorded and produced on stolen land, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. For more information about the podcast, you can visit primadonnapodcast.com. The third portrait in this series is of Suzanne Ingleton, actor, director, stand-up comedian, architect, and civil celebrant, amongst other things. Suzanne is well known for her work with the Pine Factory, as well as in many of her own productions. She has much to say on being part of a collective, collaborative art-making process, and also on being a mother in the arts. There is a language warning on this episode.
It's funny to think of me doing something that's not creative. I think if I could put my mind to that, I couldn't think of anything that didn't have some urgency about it or some fiery point, something that was pushing me, what's the word, electrifying me, like turning me on or something. And for me, I suppose I've learned over the years that any act that is an act without desire is an empty act, So for me, the desire probably is at the seat of everything, a desire to bring about change, a desire to rescue, a desire to heal, a desire to be fabulous, a desire that's totally egocentric, look what I can do, a desire to surprise myself. A desire to take on something that it scares me, something I don't know anything about, but I have to always say, why has this dropped into my lap? Or why am I to go through that door? Why has that door appeared and I'm going to go through it? Most doors I go through, I always believe, and there's an energetic connectivity, and I sort of believe, I suppose, that there's no such thing as a coincidence. There's always, for me, I believe in divine sequence. So and I've understood this through my healing work and my shamanic work, that you actually never go off your path. You're always on your path. It's just that it seems like shit at times and you think, I've left my path, but this is your path. And I think that sometimes my path is looks like the entrails of some disemboweled beast, But I know there were seminal moments that were moments where I could see myself teeter-tottering on that one or that one, and I went on that one and understood much later that that was the right choice. And at other times I've teeter-tottered and gone back on the other one and seen later, oh, well, that's what I learned from not doing the right thing, So, and I try to encourage students in that to understand that concept that you're always on your path. You're going to start to learn something really difficult now, and you're going to learn why you chose to do that. And hopefully in that process you are going to grow stronger, heal, in that shamanic way. Interesting. It's funny because when a lot of people talk to me about what I've done, and it's, the Pram Factory comes up all the time, and that's about it. And in fact, the Pram Factory for me was the leaping off point. It was after the time at the Pram Factory that, apart from one special cell group in the Pram Factory that we created, it was after that I actually became who I it might be the wrong word, that I actually explored who I was about to become all the time. You know, as I ate up more and more of life and challenges and things, becoming a writer, writing my own shows. The seeds of which were planted at the Pram. I remember when we did the show, the Hills Family Show. There's one thing about the Pram Factory style that when I finally got in there, I came back from overseas and sort of easily stepped in because they were all my mates from uni who were running it, you know, and I'd sort of gone and left and gone to England while they were just starting. It was really a funny it was interesting that I got back just in time to sort of slot myself in around 1970, around then. But yeah, the seeds of the Pram Factory were people got in there and they did their shtick. They did their shtick, which was they had a thing, they had a talent, they had an instant performance technique, and I had one too. And that was all I knew was like this crazy review style technique, and I remember the Hills Family Show probably was the epitome of that for me in terms of the shows that I did at the Pram, and it was in that show that Rob Meldrum was in the show too. But at that time, Rob was studying with Rowena Balos, who'd come out to do the voice work of Iris Warren, but Kristen Linklater was the teacher from it started with Iris Warren at LAMDA in London Academy of Dramatic Art, and it was given to Kristen Linklater, and I've actually subsequently worked with her in France, but and then Rowena Balos had it. So she came out here to teach, and she was seminal to many, many people and many, many theatre companies. She was teaching Jenny Kemp, and Rob went. And Jenny Kemp at the time wasn't part of the Pram Factory, but Rob was. And I remember during the Hills Family Show where I was having a fabulous time, and it was very funny and getting great reviews and this and that. And I remember after one show, Rob coming up to me, and I didn't know Rob very well then, you know. And he said to me, he's quite serious, you know, and he said, I think I was taking my wig off at the time. He said, you know, there's another way to do all of this. I remember just thinking, fuck you. I'm doing okay, thanks. You know, I'm starring, it's great, this is hysterically funny, and we're wondering, what do you mean? And he just, it was very brave of him to have done that. I mean, it was totally brave and generous for him to say that to me, because I was an egomaniac, you know. Anyway, so he said this to me, and I got really insulted, and then he, after that show was over, he connected again, and he put a sign up saying, does anyone want to come and learn the Rowena Balos workshop, because I'm doing it now and I'm prepared to teach people. Okay. And out of that, and we went down to the Tilly space, which was down in Faraday Street. The Pram had sort of grabbed a few empty warehouse spaces around Carlton. Of course, there's none now, but anyway, there were then. And he put a notice up. And I went to the workshop that he was teaching the voice work of Kristen Linklater, right? And she has a book called Freeing the Natural Voice. And I've got a copy of it, which is like gold. If you can ever find it, and you're a performance artist, you should get it. And he was a great teacher. I mean, we all went there. I mean, there was Susie Potter, there was me, Kerry Dwyer came. She didn't stay long. She left. I think Jane Clifton even stuck her head in the door, and then she left. But there was Ros de Winter, and out of that, came the Stasis group, and that was Ros, Robert, and I. And we pulled Jenny Kemp in to help us in Peer Gynt, which we did. That was our first show, which we did at St Mark's Hall, and that was in 1976, I think. And then Jenny came into the group and did a lot of work with us too, because she was also trained in the Balos stuff, and she became the outside eye. She wasn't the director. We all had a horror of directors at the Pram Factory. It was a very strange atmosphere there. Well, mainly because there weren't any. I mean, and because of that collective consciousness, no one was allowed to be the leader or stand out. You know, it was up to the individual to bring their energy into the group, and everyone was equal, which was bullshit. You know. Anyway, so we started the group called Stasis. We started with Sylvia Plath's poetry. We started with a show which we called Stasis. And that name came from Stasis in Darkness, which is the beginning lines of one of Sylvia Plath's poems. So I'd been working with Sylvia Plath's poetry, and it had just come to me, and I was going through a really shitty time in my marriage. I was very unhappy. I had 2 kids. I felt like I was still a virgin, hadn't had an orgasm yet. 2 kids on further down. I was like, what the fuck, you know. So, but other things in the marriage were no good. It was just the most unfortunate time for me. Double stress because none of the others had kids, and none of them could even imagine what I was going through. And years later, when Roz had a child, and when Jenny had a child, and Rob didn't, of course, but they at various times came to apologise to me for being so ignorant of the difference between our lives. When we would get to work, I would get to work having done God knows what. Got kids to creation, you know, packed off a husband. And during that time with Stasis, I actually went through the marriage breakup. But apart from all that, there was like 2 lives that I lived. All my life was the life of a mother and a homemaker and an artist. And the artist most often got sacrificed for the children and the home, and then at times the children got sacrificed to the job, the money job aspect of the art. Although I must admit that I have very, very ever rarely done a job just that I didn't want to do because for the money. And I think some very difficult decisions can come up for an artist when they know that, you know, the job that the work they want to do is not going to make as much money as that shitty job that, you know, where you're going to be doing some shitty work on TV and you're fucking going to hate it, you know, but you'll get paid the money. And there's a very interesting story. When we were Stasis and we were working on the Sylvia Plath show, we worked in that tiny little church building on the corner of Gatehouse Street, and there's a little sort of funny little church hall there, and we were working in there. That was Roz and Jenny, Roz and Rob and I, just the 3 of us. We created a show about Sylvia Plath, which we toured around to various places. We did it at the Ewing Gallery once, and that was to try to support us and make money to do something else. But while we were rehearsing that show in that tiny little theatre space, Roz hadn't been sharing with us what was happening to her. But what happened one day was this sort of chauffeur person knocked on the door of the building and delivered to Roz this huge bunch of flowers, like, and Rob and I were like, what's that? And Roz is sort of going, oh no, you know. And we said, what's going on? She said, oh, they're from Hector Crawford. What? What do you mean they're from Hector Crawford? You know, why is he giving you flowers? She said, oh, look, he wants me to, they want me to do the role in this show that they're doing, and I just don't want to do it, you know. What show? What show? I don't know. It's called something. They want me to play the mother. The Sullivans. They wanted her to play the mother in the Sullivans. Now, Rob and I were like so... well, we were gobsmacked, but we were also... We didn't get it. We didn't understand that you could turn that down to do our little Sylvia Plath show. Our... how can I explain it? But you see, there was Ros de Winter who'd come from London, performed there. She was in one of the original episodes of Doctor Who, who had done theatre and knew that there's got to be more. She was the catalyst for us, you see. She transformed us from performers into actors with her intensity and her straight through line all the time. She had a line that you could do something and she'd say, "Can we just do that again?" And it was like, "Oh, fuck, we've got it, haven't we? Isn't that it?" It's like, Jesus, Ross. No, she would just push us one more time over the cliff. The way that it went was that we all got together with Rob's workshop. And then we said, well, look, this is pretty interesting. Let's do a show. Basically, we did a show about doing voice exercises. And we did it in the back there of the prayer factory. But then Ros said, no, let's start to work with our dreams. And so we all brought in a dream. And then we started to create a theatrical performance of that dream, and they were really weird, fantastically weird, and we were mad. I don't know. People came to see the show, and people said, "I don't know what they got from Stasis. I have got no idea," but we lay on the floor and began the show doing body exercises and making sounds, and then we all went into a dream, and then we all got up, and then Rob and I, then we worked with a bit of Sylvia Plath's poetry. That was when we started to touch, and she got worked into Stasis, into that show. So Susie Potter, me, Rob, Yvonne Marini was in it, and she became a sort of outside eye. We called them the outside eye, not the director, because they really weren't the director, because we were all the director, you know. So anyways. But that show, after that, then we did the Sylvia Plath show, and then we did Peer Gynt. And when we did Peer Gynt, it was I don't know how it happened, but we all discovered a way of working and learning lines where we would lie on the floor with your head in someone's hands, and we were imaging the lines. We were feeding the lines to the actor. So as you did this process of feeding the lines and the actor imaging an image for each word and the sound in the mouth, and as you did that, of course, you two had your own images. So what happened was, when we did Peer Gynt, we couldn't do the whole play. We called it the Young Peer Gynt. It was the whole first half of the play where he leaves his mother, she dies, and he leaves and he goes off into the world and does all that stuff as a troll. He doesn't realise he's become a troll. And we did that, and we just swapped all the roles around. So we just said, well, act one, scene one, I'll be Peer. And we drew straws. We didn't say who was going to do it. We picked out stuff out of a hat. We just left it to the universe to tell us who we were going to be. So every scene, and we wore a little brown waistcoat if you were Peer Gynt, and if you were also, you had a shawl. If you were Ingrid, you had a sort of white cloth around your head. You know, we just wore basic blacks, and we decided when we started to work, we knew we had to get out of the pram factory. We had to get out of that building. We had to get away. We stopped going to committee meetings and things, and they hated us. They got so pissed off with us because we we wanted to do something more, we wanted to go deeper. We wanted to be free enough to see what else there was. So we found St. Mark's Hall. Father Michael, he was lovely. He gave us the hall. We rehearsed in the hall. Then we rehearsed upstairs where there was a yoga space later. And then we kept rehearsing there when we did Antony and Cleopatra as well. And we performed Peer Gynt in that hall. I remember going down to the hospital and getting all the sheets that they didn't want and hanging them all around the walls. And I had this vision of these huge cable reels, these great big wooden cable reels. I'd seen them on a truck and I thought, oh shit, aren't they great? So we got hold of a big one, a middle one and a little one, and they became our set. And in the Hall of the Troll King, Ros sat on top of this huge cable reel as the Dover King, the father Troll King, she sat there in this. She was so fantastic. And I was Peer Gynt in that episode, in that scene, and I remember taking the next size cable reel and I rode it down the middle of St. Mark's Hall. Couldn't do that now. And then hung onto it and then rolled around inside it, making sure my hands didn't get rolled over as we went around, And it was amazing. And then Neil Giles came in at halfway through, sort of said he'd play drums for us. So, and he did. He came in and he played drums. And we didn't quite know what to do with Neil because we were very insular at that point of time, And so Jenny came and watched it a bit and did some floor work with us when we were working at St. Mark's, but she wasn't in it, but she again gave us an outside eye to it. And then I remember we'd start behind the curtain, and Ros, the very opening night, I remember Ros she said, now, we used to gather because we were in deep meditation with each other, it was quite an extraordinary experience. And I remember her saying, we all got together and we all held, and then she put her arm up, she said, to the death, she goes, and we all went, to the death, and then we started, and then we just we kept to the roles that we had divvied up, but we knew everyone else's lines, and we trimmed it a little bit to it. So it was amazing. I mean, and I don't know how many people saw it, but every now and then I'll run into someone who says, I saw Peer Gynt. And you go, oh my God. And they say, it was amazing, And we had one woman who came up to us one night and she said, she was American, she said, I've seen every piece of theatre in New York and I've never seen anything like that. So we were, that was all we needed, we didn't, it was almost like a secret society stasis. And then we decided we'd do Shakespeare. And then, we'd done Ibsen, so now we'll do Shakespeare. We'll do Antony and Cleopatra. We decided, and then that was like, the minute we said to the collective, we want to do Shakespeare, we had to go to the collective you went to the collective with an idea for a show, and then the committee would go, the planning committee would then go, yeah, all right, well, we can fit in here. We'll do it in the back theatre. We'll be fine. We'll do it in the back theatre. And then we had Jenny on board. So there was Jenny, Rob, me and Ros, and everyone else who had been in the original stages, like Yvonne and Susie Potter dropped out, and we found our centre. And Jenny didn't want to act. She really didn't want to act because she really was more of a director. But then again, I was a director too, and I knew that I kept having these visions of scenes unfolding. Because I trained as an architect, I have a very high visual sense, and I've always designed all my own posters. I've designed all my own sets. So I designed the poster for Peer Gynt. I designed the program poster for Antony and Cleopatra as well. But, so again with Antony and Cleopatra, we had to strip it back to the bare essentials that, one scene we were with the 4 soldiers, and when we could hear Antony's ghosts coming in, and then I was Cleopatra, Rob would be Antony, Ros would be somebody else. Then I loved playing Antony. I loved doing Antony. That really just, I felt so much power doing Antony, and Rob playing Cleopatra, and we just put on, I did all the costumes, I made all these robes. So Cleopatra had an emerald green robe, Antony had a red robe. We just swapped around. And then we had Octavia, who was Antony's wife, where he gets married and goes back to Rome, and she gets the messenger in who tells her that Antony's got married, and she sort of wants to kill the messenger. Octavia was a dummy, and the dummy was operated upstairs in the little lighting box at the back theatre. It was. Oh, that's right. And we had Eric Engelbogen. Now, again, he was going to do music, and honestly, this poor man, he must have had the most worst time, because we never listened to him. We never wanted him there, and yet somehow we let him come in to do this, and he would be hitting things and like hitting, here's a drum kit, but he'd be had all these nuts and bolts and things around and sit on the floor, and it was like, we just wanted him to go away. It was just terrible. Poor man. It was just terrible. I'll never forget him. Oh, God. So we just sort of ignored Eric. And so we had scrolls. And I mean, this last, this production of Antony and Cleopatra that we did, there were 4 actors. So we each had a roll. I mean, in the olden days, the part you had was on a roll, a rolled up piece of paper that had what part you had. That's why the word roll is from that. Okay, what roll have you got? Well, I've got this roll, then unroll it. So we had that, and we knew which, if you were one, A, B, C, or D. So D was Antony in that scene, Cleopatra in that scene, a soldier, da-da-da-da, and that's how it all panned out. Octavius Caesar, and we did that. And then on the last few performances, I remember we all stood there one night to the death, one night, and we just said, fuck it, pick out of a hat which role you've got. So we just took them out of the hat. So if you'd been doing D, you suddenly got to do A. So that we knew the whole play. The method that we were working with was shamanic. Now, we didn't know that. There wasn't a name for it. It was, this is 1978, 77. I mean, this is, we were doing stuff that we didn't have a word for it. We were just acting, I suppose, I remember one night when we were rehearsing upstairs, Antony and Cleopatra, we were rehearsing upstairs in St. Mark's Hall, and Roz was playing Octavius Caesar. Now, the thing about Octavius Caesar comes up against Mark Antony, and Octavius Caesar is young and vicious youth, and Antony is old and gnarled and scarred warrior. And in one of Shakespeare's, one of the scenes, the soothsayer comes to Antony and he says to Antony, your spirit near him goes under. So when you are with him, your spirit dies. You can't fight him because there's something in you that will go under to this, guy. So Roz was playing Octavius. She's in the hall, and there's one scene where she faces up to Antony, and she was a slight woman, but we were shape-shifting, and I know that I was watching with Jenny because Rob was playing Antony, and Roz walked down the hall, and I remember her arms going up, sort of like in this strange laconic gesture, taunting him with the words, and Rob was like fuming, down the other end of the hall. They were yards apart, and Roz just slowly crossed the floor towards him like a serpent, like a snake, and we just sat there. We thought, it's in my brain. I'll never lose that picture or that feeling of what was happening there. And I think I think it's funny because I remember Rob coming back with a story years and years and years later where Stephen, who was teaching voice at the VCA for a long time. Anyway, he'd been to see a production of Antony and Cleopatra in Canberra, and Rob was there, but he didn't know him. Anyway, he came back out and he said to someone, oh, yes, well, that was all very good, but I tell you what, there was nothing like this production I saw of this play in the back theatre at the Pram Factory. And Rob was like, yes. We took a workshop out of Antony and Cleopatra. We took a workshop and we took it around school so we could get the money together so we could do the play in the back theatre. We tried to become self-sufficient because every minute of the way we were fighting the APG Collective, who said we shouldn't be doing Shakespeare.
And that was the Pram Factory.
That was the Pram Factory Collective, yeah. And there was Jack Hibbard translating Baudelaire and doing all his stuff, but we weren't allowed to do Shakespeare. They were so fucked, honestly, in their brains. They just didn't. And then at the end of that year, of course, Suzanne Spunner, who was writing for the Melbourne Times, she gave us the year's award for the best theatre produced all year, and she gave it to Stasis. And then the Pram Factory were like, oh, good. Oh, well, that's good. So we had, for me, that was more or less the end. At the end of that, I did 2 shows, A Light Shining in Buckinghamshire, which we did at the Pram Factory, and Carol Churchill play, lovely play, about the diggers and the revellers, ranters and the diggers in London, English play. And then we did Traitors by Stephen Saw, which Kerry directed with Nano Nagel. She directed it as well. And then I left. I went overseas and went to London, got pregnant with Rick, and came back with the kids, pregnant. And while I was pregnant, I'd rung up Rod Quantock and said, look, I really want to do a show. I don't think I'm going to be pregnant again, but I really want to do a show being pregnant, and it was like, and I said, I'm too tired, I'm not going to do it. And he rang me back, he said, come on, he said, look, we've got a gap, you can do it, what do you, And I said, oh God, what am I going to do? So 2 a.m, up I wake up, and I'm channeling this idea of a pregnant man. And so that was the birth of Bill Rawlings, the pregnant man. And he was sort of based on my brother. I don't think my brother ever recognised himself, probably just as well. And a pregnant man, an ochre male. And the journey into that was, again, a shamanic journey, a shape-shifting journey I was 8 months pregnant when I did the show at the Comedy Cafe. And that was 1981, I did that. And Bill then subsequently just kept coming back into my work. So, he's been in so many shows, and Stand Up and Strip Jack Naked was a show that came in 1985, which was really built around Bill and Gemma. And Gemma had appeared after, when I had the babe, when I had Roxy, I came back and did a show called Mother's Courage, which was again at the Comedy Cafe, and it was all about Bill having had the baby. I was Bill again. One incredible night. Oh, God, the things that happened. One incredible night upstairs. It was upstairs at the Comedy Cafe, so they would all eat a meal, a terrible meal. They would all eat a meal. They weren't chefs, any of those people, Rod and Mary and all of them. There was a table full of people who didn't stop talking the whole way through. So I'm doing the show and people are saying, shut up, like this fucking table full of people with one main guy up at the end, Anyway, I took them to task, because by this stage, nothing was going to faze. Stand-up comedy is such a rort, but you just got to be, I'll talk about that in a minute. Yeah. But this particular night, this table full of people, rude assholes, and I remember saying, I knew his name was Guy, all right, and suddenly something flashed through my mind that he was a gynecologist. I suddenly knew what was happening here. Anyway, he might not have been, but it worked. Guy, the gynecologist. So then I started, testing him, and he said, he threatened me, and he said, come down outside and we'll sort this out. He thought I was a man. This happened a lot.
Yep.
And I said, oh, this would be unbelievable. If I said, anytime, Guy, we'll go down, we'll sort it out now. Come on, get up off the table. Anyway, so in the end, we couldn't, I just said, I took a bucket, a potty or something. I said, okay, everyone. I said, what is it, Guy? You want your money back? I handed it around the whole room, gathered money for everyone to get him out of the building, and I dumped it on the table in front of him. I said, now clear out. And they all got up and they went down the stairs. And as they went down the stairs, the fuse boxes at the door, and they turned the lights off. Oh, they were so brave and wonderful. Anyway, that was just... but at the moment, there was a moment where this man was going to come out and punch me in Brunswick Street. Oh, it would be fantastic, I mean, that would have been, anyway, many, many times I got confused. I did strip jack naked up at the club in Sydney, and Bill would arrive, and there was a table full of lesbians, right? All sitting there, and Bill would go up to a table full of women. They didn't have to be lesbians, just women. And he'd say, "G'day, girls, what are you doing here all alone?" And they'd either react to that, or the lesbians all reacted and told me to fuck off, all this like, next minute I'm up on the stage and I'm Sue Ingleton, and they're like, oh my God, So there was a lot of payback in that, I must admit. After the pram, I left Melbourne. I moved up to northern New South Wales with Rick, and I'd had Roxy, and Roxy was a home birth baby, and had Roxy, and then I sold up my house and we moved up there, and that's where I began to. I did the show being pregnant and that stuff, and did La Joke, and Gemma, and that was all created here, and then Gemma arrived when I was breastfeeding Roxanne, and that was in the year, still 1981. So Bill had the baby, but then Gemma, I did a show with Ursula Harrison from the pram, and Ursula just had a baby too. She'd had Mina, and I'd had Roxy. So we thought, let's do a show together. We called it the Blood and Milk Show. Can you imagine what it was about? So we got up there. And Gemma, and we were separate but sort of together. But Gemma was, I was breastfeeding, and I was 38, I must have been 38 at that point. But I was tired, I was exhausted, So I did a show. I created this character called Gemini Marina Hatchback, GMH, all my life. So I've been to the guru to get a new name. So her name was Gemini Marina Hatchback, So she spoke like that because she was so. I was on, I was on Sarah Paxton, and she would just go into. She would name every drug that was ever invented. She was on it, but she was also very confused. I mean, she would say, I went to a meeting, Western Mining, and she threw tampons at Ivy Parvo. I made it. It was a shareholder. It's all right, I am a shareholder. And then she would go, so like she was like 1 foot as a 1 foot as a hippie type of woman, and the other foot is in the banking sector. I mean, she was totally confused, and so, but she was the most perfect. She said she like Pine Gap was happening, so she was going to, she pulled everything was. At the time was there. So she said, I went to Pine Gap and I was arrested for throwing, I was arrested for throwing my underpants over a security officer. And she said, and they got me down to the Alice Springs police station, and I substituted tampons for my fingers. I don't think they'd ever seen a tampon, let alone a used one. So she just had this insane thing. She got Femme Fresh and she sprayed the front row of the audience with Femme. She said, it's all right, women put this up their cunts. It's not going to hurt you. Men going, ah! She would take a Modest belt out of her little box and she'd say, she'd hold it up and she'd say, I lost the only 2 pubic hairs I had in one of these. And then she'd get tampons and she says toxic shock pellets, and she'd fling them out to the audience. Celebrancy was just something I did on the side.
Yeah.
Mind you, I did learn a lot. It put me back in contact with my writing and also with my love of literature and of poetry, and it extended me into deeper realms of poetry, because celebrancy is all about poetry, quite frankly, and it's all about healing, and it's all about a lot of the time, the celebrancy is interesting because a lot of the time I would find myself with 2 people who really sometimes didn't know why they wanted to get married, and that would be a question I would always ask them pretty up close, so why are you going to get married? And they'd both stare at each other, and she would usually say something and he would go, yeah, or usually the guys were so reticent to actually have anything to do with the ceremony. So many, I would say 80% of the guys were so not interested in the ceremony because they sort of, she was obviously she had a dream. It seems to be a dream for women. The marriage is a dream for women. It's a thing that connects them to their mothers, either for good or for bad. And the men go along with it just to keep the waters smooth. And maybe the man has a mother who wants to be a part of it too. But essentially, it's a female dream, which is so insane because it's a male construct in a way. The marriage that we have this day now is a construct of male patriarchal property rights, and that's all that marriage contract is. And finally, we got rid of John Howard's unbelievable marriage is a union between a man and a woman, and it was that used to just drive us all insane, and most of my clients didn't want it said, but we had to say it, and then they would have me do a thing at the end of it saying, they don't believe in that, which was, great. But marriage, the sacred marriage, the hieros gamus is what I was always interested in, which is the coming together of the male and the female. And the Indian ceremonies of you are his god and he is your goddess, or blah, blah, blah. Those equivocations of the balance of yin and yang, and marriage, being 100% and 100%, not 50% and 50%, because that concept of 50%, 50-50 is really bad.
Yeah.
Really bad.
Yeah.
You either give it 100% or you give it nothing, Anyway, so I learned a lot through ceremony, through poetry, and I went back into reconnecting with poetry, which at school and at uni I was really into poetry, and I was very romantic and really got into John Donne and got into Vidyapati, who was an Indian poet. However, I'd never come across Rumi, and I had never come across Rabindranath Tagore and all these amazing, beautiful concepts that you could write. And a lot of the people in the celebrancy, I would say, well, what about poetry? And they go, oh, no, I did poetry in school. I fucking hated it, Oh, no, that's not poetry. Let me read you something, And then they'd go, oh, is that poetry? Oh, that's pretty cool, So there was a lot. It was a time in my life where a lot of, I think actually, as I think about it now, it was like a lot of the time I knew I had a pathway there. There was a pathway that opened me deeper into the healing work that I do now. And especially, I do funerals now. I stopped doing marriages a couple of years ago because I'd sort of had it up to pussy's bow with marriages. And I committed myself more to rituals and funerals. And then the shamanic healing that I'm trained in now was obviously at the bottom of all of that. It was like I was feeding an underground river of something I was being drawn to more and more. And when I worked with Kerry Dwyer on my theatre, which we'll get to in a minute, the seeds of shamanism was in our work, and we really didn't know that. So I'll come back to the theatre. After the stand-up comedy things and all that travel overseas and awards here and there and going to Montreal and doing Strip Jack Naked in Montreal and getting my foot in the door, it never really took off because I always chose the family first. I always chose my children, and I always chose the life that I was creating with Rick Ludbrook, that we went up to the North Coast and built this house up in the North Coast. So somehow I could say it was a sacrifice, but on the other hand, it wasn't a sacrifice. It was an amazing way to sort of keep doing everything, I suppose. And after around 88, 87, I'd read a book by Dale Spender called Women of Ideas and What Men Have Done to Them. It's a fantastic book, huge, thick tome. And in it, she just took the lives of, 50 women, her research is amazing. She's one of our great feminist authors. And out of that, I got this idea to do a show about these lost women in history. And I did, and I created, and I researched and ended up with probably about... I think there were seven women, and the show was too long. God, I had to get rid of Sarah Grimke, who was the most extraordinary story. An American woman who was a suffragette and gave it all up because her brother-in-law told her she didn't sound very good when she spoke. Anyway.
Oh, wow.
And she gave it up to look after her sister Angelina's children. And her sister was married to the great slave reformer. So an extraordinary woman. And at one point I ordered from the local library a copy of her book on emancipation of women. I'm sitting up there up in the jungle of Taylor's Arm, and I go into the local library in Nambucca, and they've got this thing wrapped up in plastic, and I get this book, and I open it up, and I had to sign something for it, but this is Nambucca Library, and I go and I get this book, and it was like, this was her book. This was an original fucking copy of this book that she wrote. The pages were, it was like all of a sudden I was holding this woman in my hands, she was 1848 time, Anyway. So Near Mrs. I got a grant with the Australia Council to write this show, and I thought it was about mothers and daughters. And I must say at this point of time that most of the theatre I've ever written has always been about the mother-daughter diaspora, what is it called? Not diaspora. Dichotomy, anyway, that thing that mothers and daughters have. And always, I think my shows were always really dedicated to my mother, even though she never really understood any of them. She would sit through me in a show, and at the end, it was like, what did you think of the show? And she'd say, oh, your legs look lovely. That was it. That was what she got. So, my darling mother, God, what a treasure. Anyway, so Near Mrs. Went on at the Universal. No, it opened, because I was living up in New South Wales, and most of my theatre was being done in Sydney, so it went on at the Performance Space in Sydney, and Kerry was my director. And Kerry came up to Taylor's Arm, but a week before she was due to come up, or 3 days before she was due to come up, I thought I had the show all worked out. I was going to have all these wigs and things on stands, and I was going to become one woman and then another woman, and I'd chosen the women that I wanted to do. And they were all amazing women. There was Afra Ben, these are women people hadn't heard of in 1988. Afra Ben, Charlotte Perkins Gilman, Sojourner Truth, see, I can't even remember them. Oh, come on, I can't even think. Oh, yeah, Margaret Sanger, her Birth Control, They all represented eras and times and milestones in our history, and all of them unrecognised and all of them buried in time. And at the time I had this character, Edith Wise had come to me in 1988. She arrived when I was doing a show at the Universal Theatre down here called Pennies Before the Holidays by a playwright, Lissa Benyon, I think is her name. I think she's still there. I don't know. Anyway, so Flash Rat was the wonderful, amazing, beautiful, now dead Kerry Eccles, who was a lifelong friend, and I used to call her my beloved critic. She always told me I should never get up and sing. I always threatened I'd sing at a funeral so she couldn't die, see, so that was one of our arrangements. Anyway, in that show, I was playing an old lady called Daisy, and at an interview on ABC Radio, we were publicising the show. Ros Horan directed it, and I'm in there doing this interview with John Yost, who was working at the ABC at the time, and one of my oldest friends as well. And all of a sudden, this woman came into me, and she started to talk, and it wasn't the character Daisy. It was so not the character Daisy. And this woman, she started to talk like this, and I was like, who the hell is this? Who is this person? And we got out of it, and Ros Horan turned around and she said, who was that? And I said, I've got no idea. Anyway, after that play, I went home, and I was asked to do a launch of a women's collective up in Nambucca. And all of a sudden, I sat down one night, as is the way, and this woman just told me her life. She came from Wauchope, she was this, she was that. And her name was Edith Wiseman, but she dropped the man bit when she got rid of 2 men with 1 stroke. Her husband died of a stroke. I mean, look. And so she was born in 1988 at the age of 88. And she stayed 88 right through into about 2007. And then in the end, I just stopped saying she was 88 because it was...
Well, because she's still here. She's
because
doing really well.
We had all these jokes about her. The jokes circled around being born in 1900. So 1988, she was 88. But then, of course, by the 2004 or 10 or whatever it was, she couldn't be 110 years old. Anyway, but the point of me telling you about Edith now is that... in Near Misses, with all these women, what suddenly happened when Kerry came up to our property up in the Nambucca, I had previously put my back out and I could not walk. Now, this is something that's always plagued me. It's a really bad lower back. And so I could crawl, no one could touch me. And we found... She came there for 2 days. So I had to lie in bed, and we rehearsed with me lying in bed. I mean, it was one of those funny... I know how these things happen. They happen from an emotional click moment. And I remember I turned around in the kitchen to admonish one of the kids, but I was really angry with Rick and myself, and my back went out. And that was the end of me. So for 3 days, we worked in bed. Kerry sat on the bed and wrote as I spoke. And we went through all the women, but we got all the women and we went through their chakras. So I was doing artwork on their chakras and starting to rewrite all the scripts that I'd written, some of which were completely wrong. The script for Aphra Ben I'd written, she stood and she looked at me. You see, here's the other trick. These women were real. They were alive people. They were the container of souls. They existed. So their energy is there as a real energy out there in the etheric, still there. So you can tap in. And that's when I first began to channel in to other energies outside. So back in 1988, the show was going on in 1989. So we were rehearsing in 89. It started in... end of March it started at the performance space. So working with Kerry on that, and we'd worked together a lot before, but this specifically, we'd done a really good show at the Belvoir Street called Horner Madhouse, where it was Frank Arama's scripts, and it was a fantastic show. 4 women directors. It was really good. But this show was... See, Kerry's also very psychic and we both connected, both in different ways though. And so the techniques that we were using were techniques of shamanism, although we didn't call it that. I don't know. We didn't call it anything. So lying in bed with me doing all of this, Aphra Ben's script had to be thrown away. She looked at me because the women would appear to me, and she looked at me and she turned away from me and she didn't want to say anything that I'd written for her. And then again, sort of, 5 a.m. in the morning, I woke up and I rewrote her script and I found myself writing her poetry. I was writing poetry in the style of Aphra Ben. I mean, I was like, and in the end, when I look at the script now, I can't remember what she wrote and what I wrote, but she was writing through me, So this happens a lot. This is how I write plays. The people just talk to me, or I write books. I've just got this book now that's being published next year, which is called An Imagined Biography, because these 2 women that I've discovered there's not a letter from them, nothing, just a couple of newspaper articles about them and stuff. But however, I've written all these scripts about them. They're talking. So sometimes it's really great to have this skill, but sometimes when you're sitting with someone you don't know and you suddenly get all this information and you just don't want to know about it, it's really hard. So Nearmas has opened after this extraordinary moment when we both landed down in Sydney, went into the performance space, and the energy in that space was black and heavy, and they were kept being robbed. And when Kerry and I went into the space, we sat in the middle of the floor and we did this huge meditation in there, and she went down we both ended up in the centre of the earth. I ended up on a rock with an Aboriginal man who was holding a spear, and he said to me, you can't come here, there's too much pain here. And I said to him, how much pain? He said, 200 years of pain here. And I said to him, well, I am carrying 2,000 years of women's pain. Give me your pain, I will take it too. And he handed me this spear and he called me the pain bearer. And that's what that show was all about, really. So I'm getting a bit upset because it was so amazing. Kerry went down in her meditation to this centre, Mother Earth, she was birthing all these black children, and it was just, anyway, we cleared the space in there, and it was amazing. The show was amazing. It was sold out. There were people hanging from the rafters, and the last night of the show, Kerry had gone to she was directing something in Perth, and I paid for her to come back to be there on the last night of the show so she could share that amazing sort of moment. And the next morning, Sunday morning, we all woke up to find that the Chinese had murdered all their children in Tiananmen Square at the very time that it was just heartbreaking, So that show went down to the Universal Theatre and again was a huge success and stuff. But then I did a bit of it over in North America, and I wanted to take it to New Zealand where I'd taken all my other shows, but it just didn't happen. And then all of a sudden I met Marguerite Pepper, and she was a producer, and she took it to the Adelaide Festival in 1990, I think, 1989, 90, yeah, 1990, and then it went up to Alice Springs for a show. So it did have a life. It was something that knocked people out. 1989, 2090, yeah, 30 years ago. And I feel in a way that no matter what we did, what women did, it's still gone. It's gone. That show's gone. And there's no history of it. There's no reference point for it. All of that incredible work and all of that knowledge and all of that revelation and everything that was in the show, that was my experience of women doing things, and I'm listening on the radio to someone talking about the life of Muriel Matters, who was a fantastic Australian woman who went across to England to scream at the English Parliament to give women the vote. 1919, in the early years when we already had the vote. And it's like, yeah, I could scream the names, and then there's someone publishing a book about something. Now I'm publishing a book about two women no one's ever heard of, who did the most extraordinary things. And it's like almost this feminism. Got to be really careful. Feminism. Every woman is a feminist because she carries in her the death of so many women, the lives of so many, the memories of so many women, and she's the only one who's got them because she's a woman, and the experience of hundreds of years of oppression of women under the patriarchy on this planet. She carries with her the pain of what has been done to the planet. She carries with her the pain of the ecology, which is feminine, of Mother Nature, who has been raped and extorted upon. She carries that pain. To even say, oh, I'm not a feminist, that means you are not a woman. And feminism has become, as the patriarchy always manages to do, degraded, denigrated, this shitty word, these shitty women. Feminism has become the word like suffragette. it's ugly. These women are ugly. These women are, angry. These women are nasty. They don't like men, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I could just go on about I did this and I did that, blah, blah, blah. I wrote this play, I wrote that play, it got produced, it didn't get produced, I did this, I did that. And the experiences of all of that are repetitious in a way. I almost don't know why I'm doing this, because I don't want to just sound like this complaining person. I suppose I read this fantastic thing. There's a woman called Irma Bombrick, and she's gone now. She's passed away, but she was an American writer, hysterically funny writer. And I remember a long time ago reading her stuff somewhere. A really, really funny writer. And I got this book out of the local roadside library, to read. And the book was called When You Look Like Your Passport Photo, It's Time to Go Home, which is just fantastic. But she wrote this. You can go online and you can just put Irma Bombrick, Bombrech, Irma, and all her sayings are there. Her quotes. They're fantastic. But there's one quote that really hit me, and the quote is this: that when I arrive at the pearly gates, I want to be completely empty, and I want to be able to say to God, I have used everything you gave me.
Thank you for listening to the Prima Donna podcast. For more information and to hear more episodes, please visit primadonnapodcast.com.